the recording, and then I'm going to be away for just a moment because I've so
Oh,
Ned, how's the knee? How's your knee, Ned?
the knee's good. The rest of the body's weird.
Yeah, but that's
Welcome
always
to
been
that
true.
club.
That's true. That's true. I found out that I have a condition that I've had all my life. Apparently, I don't remember the name of it. It's a very long 3-letter medical word. It says I've got
Weird small toe itis.
yeah, I've got extra sensitive skin, and sometimes when a very soft thing brushes, particularly around my waist, it feels like wires scratching me, and that was for some reason activated by, made more severe by this surgery and all the stuff that I went through, and it keeps me awake. I don't sleep at night, so. But otherwise, my knee is fantastic, I'm told. So,
Well, I did not know that you've always had super sensitive skin.
well, I knew, but I'd ignore it as much as I could.
You didn't let us know that in high school very often.
Well,
You didn't say, "Oh, guys, I've got super sensitive skin. Don't touch me," kind of thing.
That would have
Those-
been a death
I
way.
try to keep some things to myself.
Those seminary uniforms didn't help at all, did they,
Can
Ned?
you
No,
imagine?
Later, maybe you could go naked under the cassock.
Again, I did it a couple of times. No.
maybe that's why caskets are so popular these days with these young guys.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm. Thank you so much for your prayers. It was an experience that I guess I'm going to have another one, but I'll know what to expect now in ways that I didn't. So it'll be good. How are all you guys?
I wasn't here last week because I actually have had a number of medical. First, I had 2 teeth out, which is a big deal because rearranging your denture and all that. But then I had a recurrence of prostate cancer, so I have 2. So they decided, the decision is to just do nothing because your age works against it. But they decided like my urological health was good enough. So I have 2 sessions, one Monday, this past Monday, and one this coming Monday, where I go in the hospital. I have to, no food on Sunday and go under for about 2.5 hours. And they go in with a probe and deposit, not seeds, just radiation, direct radiation on the lesions in the prostate. So I've got just one, so it's just 2 sessions, but that's where I was last week. So
Amazing that we live in such technology, isn't it?
yeah.
So you actually still have your prostate.
I did, because the doctor told me at the time there was sufficient, that was 12 years ago, there was sufficient cancer that he was afraid, and he was the top urological, surgeon in Boston. He was afraid that some of it might escape into the rest of the body. So I had radiology and hormone therapy. So I'm doing that again, but it's a different thing.
Yeah.
And it's over in 2 sessions rather than 39. So
That's better.
yeah.
Well,
So 2 sessions are a hell of a lot more intensive than the 39.
So Frank, I had a good friend of mine who was Sandra's gynecologist, and he had prostate cancer, and so they gave him hormone therapy for a period of time,
Right.
and he had this weird sensation going on in his body that he felt like he was menstruating or something like that, and so
Some guys get hot flashes.
Yeah, he did. He started getting hot flashes.
that's what I've had the last 2 years.
I didn't have hot flashes, but anyway.
So all of his lady friends, including my wife, would rib him incessantly and say, "Mark, you always diminished our hot flashes and said we're making it up and all of that." And they just delighted in the fact that he was having these hot flashes and had some empathy finally in his life, instead of And so, Tom, you have hot flashes?
I do. Yeah, I just last month, 2 months ago, had the last of the hormone shots. So that should, the doctor says they should start going away sometime in the spring. But
Does it,
I had the 39 sessions of radiation.
wow.
I had my prostate out in 2009, but it started to recur. The PSA started going up about 2 or 3 years ago, about 3 years ago now.
How
And
can it go up? How can the PSA go up without having a prostate?
well, what happens is, and Frank alluded to that, the if any cells escape, which I almost said gynecologist, but not my urologist, who did the surgery, was
To complete the circle.
was was quite sure he got the thing out intact. He didn't do the probe thing, the Da Vinci, but he did an open incision and got it out intact and all of that. And he said there was no sign that any cancer had escaped, so that was nice. But it turned up in a lymph node um, over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Apparently, from the scan, it was confined to that one lymph node. So hopefully the radiation and hormone stuff has taken care of it. So I'm going to have to find another way to die.
Mine is confined to the prostate, so there's
Uh-huh.
no evidence of it having escaped the
Uh-huh.
prostate.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's
So
good.
But do
anyway,
you
So,
guys
but I-
feel like
go ahead. Tim?
you have a more feminine outlook on life since you've gone through hormone therapy?
Well, it's funny because I have a friend whose pastor became a bishop, and I went out to visit them at one point, and he was going in the hospital for surgery, and so I said, well, what's wrong? And and my friend said, women's problems. He had breast cancer, which is,
Hmm.
it's
Hi, Theo.
common, but it's not unheard of in men.
Yeah.
So we're, our feminine side, I guess, Tim.
Ted Howard,
Rears his ugly head.
most of us know Ted because he was in our class, had his prostate.
Still an active judge, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had his prostate out quite a while ago, but his PSA is way up.
Yeah.
And he can't explain it to me, which is, a new inability for Ted, because he can explain pretty much everything. So I'm glad you said what you did.
Well, the first thing that they did after it was clear that the prostate, PSA was where it should not be, was to do a PET scan. And they've got a more sensitive PET scan now, different chemical than they did a couple of years ago, that will do a pretty good job of pinpointing where there is specifically prostate cancer growth.
Really?
Whether
Amazing.
it's located, whether it's limited as mine was to just a very small lymph node area, or whether it has migrated to the bone or the kidneys or
Yeah.
wherever the hell else it goes.
I'm just nonplussed by all this because I had it, and out came the prostate gland surgically, and I didn't want to have it out. I was concerned about the impotence possibility, and I was concerned, who wants to be cut all to blazes? And so the doctor sent me to the head of radiology at UCLA to talk about, that as an alternative. A wonderful woman. And she said, Mr. Crook, your cancer's progressed enough that I wouldn't know where to start. So I would just have to take out everything in the kitchen sink. And you don't want that, because with regular surgery, you might have some issues of continence, urinary continence, but with radiation of this intensity, you could have some fecal incontinence. And I said, wait, doctor, you just made this very easy. If I have to have something running down my leg, you just made the choice for me. And so far, so good. But I know two people, one of whom is Bob Jabro, who had successful prostate cancer, radical prostatectomy, etc., and wound up dying of prostate cancer.
Mhm.
And one of my deceased brothers-in-law, same thing. They implanted seeds with him.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, here he was, and dying from it.
That's those nasty lymph node neighbors of the prostate, right, Tom?
Yeah, it certainly can be, or depends on just where the renegade cells happen to lodge. One of their favorite places, I think, is in your lower back, your spine. It becomes bone cancer.
Ah,
Apparently, they can just go anywhere.
is,
You know,
is it
my
true?
my urologist ultimately scolded me because just seemed to me, stupid to come in for a checkup every 6 months or 3 months or whatever it was, when there was nothing there to check.
Yeah.
And he said, George, he said 16% of people who have had complete radical prostatectomies wind up with PSA in their blood.
Wow.
16%.
Hmm.
Is it true that
That's a mystery.
that more often than not, maybe that's not a good way to put it, that doctors will find out what kind of cancer one has in the prostate and say, you know what, let's just leave it alone. It's so slow growing that you're going to die of something else. So don't worry about it.
Depends on your age.
That was
Yeah.
part of my discussion, Ned.
Uh-huh.
Given that, I'm almost 80, part of my discussion was just watch it, because age works against prostate cancer. Or, and the decision was, given my urological health seemed to be pretty good, was to go ahead rather than just take that course.
Hmm.
But I wanted to, I missed last week and I felt bad about it, but I was meeting with doctors and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to kind of clear up, there was some confusion. There was a discussion about Paul Shanley at the end.
Yeah.
And Paul Shanley actually served over 7 years in prison. I knew him. He was a charismatic, handsome guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew, about the misleading communication to your brother-in-law, George. And he was brought back to Boston and convicted. He was during the 70s. It was very common for kids to leave home. There were a lot of homeless street kids, and in Boston, he was the priest who took care of the home, and he was celebrated for it. The cardinal was happy with it, everything, etc.
Yeah.
It was revealed later that, the abusive part of it, God knows if it went on then, but the abusive part of it took place earlier when he was in a parish. Myself and the local Unitarian minister sponsored him to come and speak to our parish during the high days of his ministering to the youth on the street. So he and then he was released from prison. He went to live in a town about 45 miles west of Boston, and he died about 2 or 3 years ago. The one who was killed in prison was a priest named John Gagan.
That's
who
right.
John Gagan was a true pedophile. And that's where I believe that's where the scandal got its name from him. Shanley was into young teenagers and all of that. What do they call it? Ephebophile or something like that. Right. But John Gagan got off on children and infants.
Oh
my
my.
God.
He was in the seminary, and on a number of occasions, the faculty didn't feel that he was up either academically or otherwise to ministry, and were recommending that he be discharged. And he had a very powerful uncle who was a Monsignor in the diocese who intervened and took care of him until he got ordained.
Hmm.
I knew him somewhat. He was a poor soul, basically. And he was murdered in prison. An inmate got into his cell and murdered him. So he was the one that was murdered. The other thing was, you talked about, I was accused. It was a very interesting kind of accusation. It was a letter in two parts, one part typed and part handwritten, obviously from someone who wasn't really completely together, to the president of my parish council. So to show what priests are going through today, and I'm not sure.
Can I interrupt, Frank? Frank, now, is this since you have returned to the priesthood
Yes.
or in your earlier life?
No, since I returned. Okay.
Okay.
And so what happened was, what kicked in with me was that I really need to think seriously about how I deal with this, rather than simply calling up the diocese and saying, I'm accused, it's not me and I got to do it. Because I might have been taken into the bureaucratic maw and God knows what would have happened.
Yeah.
So what I did was I copied the letter, and the president of our parish council actually didn't live in our parish, but he practiced there all the time. And the regional bishop, who was a really good guy, was happened to be his pastor. So I said to him, take this letter to your pastor. And then I called the pastor, the regional bishop, and told him to expect it. And he ran interference for me with the diocese. So it came out that it was another priest who had been accused with a similar name to mine and had ultimately been exonerated. And it took place in a parish that I'd never even set foot in. But you see the kind of mentality that the whole thing has imposed on us.
Yeah.
We have to sit down and we say that we can't trust anyone, no matter who, to treat us correctly. We have to strategize as to how we're going to manage anything like that. And I think that showed in the priest thing.
The lack of trust and
One other thing I wanted to say was, and I'm sorry for doing this, but these things are so wonderful. There's such George's visit to this priest who was like suicidal. And remember you told that story, George? Yeah. And asking for his blessing at the end was what I call pastoral genius.
Agreed.
It's the ultimate expression of the artistry of the priesthood at a very high level. And I was deeply touched by that, George. And I have no doubt that you probably very well saved his life. So God bless you for that.
Well, thank
Amen.
you.
Amen.
Frank, I wanted to ask you, did you have coaching? You made some very wise decisions. Where did those decisions come from? Or was it individual by yourself?
I worked in an industry for 20 years and I was the director of ethics for an industry that did business with the government. And when anything like that happened, you didn't react right away. You sat back and thought about it as to how you would strategize about this in such a way that it could be presented reasonably so that people wouldn't react just like that. Oh, we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to do the other. So I think that was part of it.
There were some very important choices about with whom to share first,
Right,
you know, the sequence.
right, exactly. Right. And so you know, so it tells you that those priests, the 82% who say they don't trust the bishop, it's absolutely right. So the point is that my first instinct was, I can't, as much as I love my bishop and I personally trust him, but I also know that in this archdiocese, he's the head of the International Commission on Protection of Children in the Vatican.
Yeah.
So he's a target for anybody.
Mhm.
So all of this stuff has to be put into the mix. And it seems to me that one thing that the diocese might think about doing is appointing an advocate for a priest. In other words, you have an advocate in the tribunal for a marriage.
Like a
If a
public
priest is
defender.
accused, before anything is done, he meets with his advocate.
Mhm.
All right, so that sounds simple. That sounds like a no-brainer. So does any diocese that you know of have that procedure in place, Frank?
Not that I know of.
Wow.
Time to write an article, my friend.
Well, it could well be. Yeah. I mean, this week, the district attorney did to my friend, an 89-year-old pastor in our diocese, taught at the seminary, was a liturgist and a great musician, sang for Pope John Paul II when he was in Boston, took a lot of seminarians in, did pastoral training, was indicted for rape.
Oh, dear.
And
At 89?
At 89,
89 years of age. And God bless the district attorney. She announced it on Monday, knowing full well that the story would die because there was no room in the paper on Tuesday after the election.
Ah,
You know, Frank, for
I'm
various
sorry to
reasons.
take it back to this, but there was just a couple of things I wanted to drop in, and
Oh.
especially after Norm's experience as well, which
Yeah.
fortunately he felt that Cardinal Mahoney treated him well.
Very well.
Mahoney and Bernardin were accused, both.
Yeah, I
you
know.
yeah.
Let me ask you this. For various reasons, I wound up a couple years ago looking up the funeral of Teddy Kennedy, which you could find, you know, on the internet.
Right.
And there was a youngish priest who said the funeral mass, who struck me very admirable guy. And I pointed that out to the group here, and those who watched it thought he was too. And lo and behold, since then, he's been accused. He's in some outlying town. I can't think of the name of it, nor do I remember his name. But he did such a great job with the funeral mass, and now he's, at least 6 months ago, was under the gun. Do you know what happened to him?
No, I don't know, because I thought that there was a family friend who said the funeral mass, even though there is a priest named Fitzgerald in the diocese, who's an older man, who's a family member of, you know, of Ted's mother, Rose Fitzgerald. So I don't think he said the funeral. I think it was a religious order man, maybe someone from Notre
No,
Dame.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But he did such a good job. He really did. Everybody of our group that watched it thought he was just, you know, just
Right.
hit all the right notes, pastorally and every other way. And then,
Yeah, like you asking for the blessing.
well, I don't know if he reached those heights, but
All right. next time I'll back off, George.
Okay, but thank you for that, Frank. Everybody I've told that story to, several priests have told me it was, it was an act of grace
Right.
that hit me to do that.
So, Tom, have you ever been accused?
Knock on wood. Thank the Lord, no.
Good.
Um,
Thank goodness.
uh, I guess like anybody, I can recall probably having put myself in occasions where an accusation could happen, even though it would not have been true. But I think fortunately nobody that I've known so far has come up with anything.
Good.
You guys remember Jack Beatty?
Yeah.
Of course.
Jack and I wound up as friends, and but before he died, I remember him saying, "I hate these assholes, these priests that molest kids." He said, "I go over to the grammar school now, and I have to be careful not to touch a kid,
Right.
and it's not my nature. I want to hug them, and yet I can't." You would have done well with that, Ned.
I remember when I was a deacon at St. Christopher's. The sisters there, I can't remember what order they were, but I would take my guitar and sing in the classrooms, get the kids all happy, and I just loved it. I loved it. And at the bell would ring and they'd come out and they'd all gather around and I'd pick them up and throw them in the air and hold them and all that kind of stuff. Just loved it. And then I don't know, a week later, the principal came to me and she said, "I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but you can't touch the kids." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Don't touch the kids. Just don't." And a year plus later, at a retreat where both she and I were taking the retreat, she came up to me and she said, "You know what? I think about you a lot because I had to tell you that. And that was just such a hard thing, number one, to do. And number two, it was so completely wrong because the kids, the interaction between the cleric, the priest, the guy with a Roman collar, loving those children was such a tender thing that they would probably remember for a long time, and that would just support them in their faith and the goodness of the church. It was just all wasted, and then she was just she started to cry. The principal, wonderful lady. Anyway,
but what wasn't she right, alas?
Well, yeah, right, practically.
Yeah.
Well, and this was what, more than 50 years ago, right?
Oh, yeah. That was a long time.
Yeah.
Norm, I saw you nodding. I hope you'll jump in. Similar experience?
Yeah, I used to love playing with the kids, and I felt so sad that you can't go out and play with them or do anything with them at all. I can't touch them, and I don't know. It just bothered me because I'm the oldest of 7. And my brothers and sisters, we always played together. And it's nothing.
Sure. And how and where did that come to your attention, like Ned's?
I don't know.
Did somebody take you aside?
No, I just saw all the stuff coming out from the diocese and said, I don't need that in my life.
Yeah.
We had an experience here. We were blessed here in Hendersonville with 28 years of Capuchin Franciscans, and they were I don't know if it's by nature or by the manner in which Capuchins are formed, but they were always huggers, and couple of years ago, our then pastor, who's now up in Hackensack, which is in New Jersey, started getting threatening letters, anonymous letters, with photographs of him after Mass hugging men and women. You know, because Father Martin he was a hugger. You know, oh, how are you, Tim? And give me a big hug. You know, and it really bothered him very, very much, because the guy, or the person who was writing these letters, not only was writing the letters, but was attaching photographs that he had taken, obviously, in the Nartrex, or before Mass, and scared the crap out of Martin. And so he turned it over to the police. He did not want to go to our bishop and say, look, I've got this kind of thing, because our bishop is a right-wing fascist Trumpite, so he didn't want to do that. And so the cops tried to follow it up, and they were unsuccessful in doing it. So finally, Father Martin, before Mass one Sunday, said, I'm having a problem here, you know, and I want to share it with you guys, you know, not to the whole congregation, and explained what was happening. Said, you know, I am naturally an affectionate guy, and I'd hate to think that I will have to change that, but this is what's happening. And I think it diffused the, I think it took the wind out of the sails of whoever it was that was writing the threatening letters, because I think he thought he had Martin over a barrel and was going to be able to get, you know, I don't know what, you know, absolution or something like that. I don't know. But it was the saddest thing, and it goes along with what you guys are saying, Ned, about children.
Yeah.
Is how do you, not just a priest, but how do you in this day and age show affection, either people of the same sex or women, you know, that you might naturally just want to grab and hug and, you know, do the line. It's become a really scary time, because, you know, I was a hugger when I was in corporate life, and man, I got called on the carpet, you know, oh, you don't know that they want, you know, that, and it really takes some of the joy out of being a naturally affectionate person. It really does, you know. And I'm sure, Ned, as a lawyer, you probably saw cases like that, or maybe they never, or George, they never worked themselves up to you, where you had harassment cases, corporate harassment cases, or maybe Frank Daly did in business. But it's a different age now.
It's a completely different age. I at one point had the human resources group under my legal care, and I had a couple of lawyers that were
This is at Unica.
representing them, and we didn't have a whole bunch, but we did have allegations, and I tried to do something like who was it that proposed an ombudsman, so to speak, someone who could
Frank did.
Frank,
Frank.
yeah.
Advocate, yeah.
Frank, I tried to put something like that together, and I was told I couldn't do it because it would appear as though I was mucking up the process.
Right.
So, you know, from the legal point of view, all we could do is advise and follow.
And try to be proactive, right?
Yeah, of course. But you know, again, the stigma. This as soon as somebody gets accused, there's this call. You know, that's just it's awful. It's just awful. And I you know, there are a whole bunch of guys that, of course, have been accused and are big time guilty. But this thing with no due process, so to speak, is just so wrong. Anyway.
Yeah.
You're guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But Norm, that's terrible, obviously. But when I was friends with Jack, he was pastor of St. Ambrose on Fairfax, and Jack had been
What's
ordained
What's Jack's name, George?
Beatty. Yeah, now deceased. But Jack was ordained in Ireland at All Hallows, I guess, and he was ordained for the class of '66 in LA. And if you guys remember, that was a dreadful class. That was Mike Wempe. That was Pete Garcia. That was Tom Warren, Ned. That was Al Ramos.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, Al Ramos swore under penalty of perjury in 25 declarations that he had raped kids. And so what did Mike Driscoll, the auxiliary then of the Diocese of Orange, do? Sent him down to TJ, where he became the vice rector of an orphanage.
Oh, dear God.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
dear God.
Yes.
It was really crazy.
Mike Driscoll did that.
I was so, he was such at least to me, a wonderful guy. He did things that were so generous. Well, I was
You're talking about Ramos Driscoll.
Ramos. Aloterio was his name. Everybody called him
I
Al.
remember him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember once he took me to UC SB to see about pre-med course there. And then when all this stuff started coming out, I mean, it wasn't just, poor guy. I mean, he was aggressive and it appeared unrepentant.
He was a rapist.
The same thing about children is, it's interesting because if the priest is supposed to be immersed in the congregation to which he's missioned, and he's got all these barriers about how he can relate to people, it doesn't make it impossible, but it makes it a little more difficult. For example, with children, I just spent 2 nights after my hospitalization with my grandchildren, 9 and 7. And
I bet that was fun. I bet that was a kick.
well, it is, but it does something for you. In fact, they were both dressed up for Halloween. Madison was Elizabeth, Mary's cousin. And my grandson, Dylan, chose to be St. John of the Cross. How he ever got to that, I don't know. One of his props was the Dark Night of the Soul.
Oh my,
With
oh
him.
my.
Okay. And I didn't have a copy of it. So now I'm in the position of being an 80-year-old priest who borrowed the Dark Night of the Soul from his 9-year-old grandson. Anyway.
Wasn't Mike Driscoll from the Long Beach area, Bellflower area, Grammar?
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
And was he
closer to Norman, I think, right?
Yeah.
And I have a memory that he was a fabulous singer, and was he part of some boys choir, or am I confusing people?
No, he was wonderful. Wonderful singer. Wonderful voice.
Yeah. Oh. Norm,
He never
this is the
should have been a
first
bishop,
time,
though.
Norm, I've seen you since you've joined the group. It's great to see you.
Well,
Yeah.
great to see you too, Tim.
Really is.
And so if I can just kind of turn it, just for me to catch up, there were a lot of us from the Long Beach area, Angels. Do you stay in touch with any of those guys, like Barney or Al Crowell or?
Yeah, Barney. Al Kroll disappeared off the map. I can't find him.
This is
But,
San
Barney, yes.
Francisco, and he's a psychotherapist.
Okay, but what about Gatlin?
Gatlin's at Piru, where I was pastor. and he's running the little parish down there. It's a double parish. It's St. Francis of Assisi and Fillmore and Piru, St. San Salvador and Piru. He runs San Salvador in the past at St. Francis, even though he's in charge of both, just takes care of the parish up there.
Okay. And so a name, I was thinking about today because I've missed so much. And I was thinking about guys from Long Beach that were ahead of us. And one name, and Crook, months ago you mentioned, was this guy when we were freshmen, Tom Horan, and who was kind of, to me, kind of like a superstar when we were in high school. And
He
I don't
was
know if
quite the athlete, yes.
was he a senior when we were freshmen, or was he a freshman in college when we were freshmen in high school? But
My
he was,
recollection is that he was 2 years ahead of us.
No,
So
no,
Was it
had to
More
be-
than that. More
2
than that.
years with Shelburne and Ramos and those guys.
yeah. What
Tom was with Amermino and Porter and
Cotton and
get
Cotton.
ordained? Did Horan get ordained?
Yes.
Yes,
About a year and a half later, he left.
Year and a half.
And he went to sheriffs, didn't he?
Yes. Became
Yeah.
sheriff.
I would see him in court sometimes in Long Beach, behind a desk in Department X. He was Tom, yeah, friendly, outgoing, welcoming.
He was from St. Anthony's, as I believe.
Yes.
Correct.
And St. Anthony's, my memory is St. Anthony's was a powerful parish in the Long Beach area. I mean, I don't know why I think that, and I may be wrong in my.
oh, it was
in my
true. It was true.
recollection.
They had a lot of guys in seminary.
That's what I thought. That's what
Yeah.
I thought.
They were also a powerhouse football team.
Yeah,
Almost-
yeah,
almost
yeah.
horrendous.
My youngest sister, art there. She's retiring this year, so she's been at St. Anthony's for a good while, and she loves it. They're having a hard time keeping teachers with the competitive pay scale that Long Beach offers versus what St. Anthony's can offer, and so but she's loved it, and so I just Horan. I don't know why Horan came to my mind.
Well, Frank, just so you know, all of us know Tom Horan.
Yeah,
Tom, this is my perspective of Tom. He was a hero to a whole bunch of guys
Mhm.
in younger classes.
Yes.
Anything he put his hand to that smelled of athletics, he would excel in.
Mhm.
It was quarterback, even though he wasn't all that tall, he was really a good basketball player and softball player,
Mhm.
everything. And I, among others, very much looked up to him. He had his own language sometimes. And there were a group of guys in his class, like Amermino and Porter, Cotton, who were
Yeah.
kind of a gang, and they were always together. And I remember one day when we were in theology, I was walking with a couple of guys, and Horan and Amermino and the other guys were on the other side walking toward us. And he said, "Hey, Ned, you don't have a lid." And I said, "What? You don't have a lid? You want one?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, and then he picked up his, and I said, "Yeah, I guess I don't have one." And so he threw it at me. He says, "It's yours now," and he just kept on going. It's kind of a guy he was. It's just gregarious, wonderful guy. And I was very surprised that he left the priesthood so early on.
That's
You know-
so. George,
Whatever
do you know
happened-
anything?
What happened to him? Does anyone know?
Well, here's a just purely speculative possibility. He was the protege of a very charismatic priest in the archdiocese,
Yeah.
Father Boyer, who was head of CCD and all of that. And Father Boyer, remember once he gave us a retreat and he slipped and mentioned Tom's name when telling some episode, and everybody just roared. And Boyer later on was accused of, guess what, guys? Pedophilia. And if
Oh my.
yeah, and if you look him up online on the Archdiocese, it was found that it was a case of probable validity of the accusations. And this was much later in Boyer's life, but God knows. I mean, I've wondered for a long time what went on, if anything, between Tom and Father Boyer. You know, because Father Boyer's charisma was Shanley-esque. You know,
Good way of putting it, George. Yeah.
yeah.
Tim, I don't know, but I'm just looking at you with the shirt you have on and the color and the buttons down the middle. And I say, if you just had a cross on, we'd be calling you Excellency.
Yes.
I wore it. It's freezing cold here today. And so I went into the closet and said, I gotta wear something appropriate. And so I found this, and I do have the cross, but I don't usually wear it on Fridays. Yeah.
Carry it rather than wear it.
Yeah.
On Fridays.
Yeah.
Tim, you said in an email a while back that your former Capuchin pastor had also been the pastor to Father Pio.
Yes. You know, he was Father John Aurelia was Pio's private secretary for about 7 or 8 years and handled most of Pio's correspondence. And in fact, there is an extensive YouTube interview with Father John many years ago, talking about his own personal relationship with Pio.
What's his
And
last
so-
name, Tom? Tim? Last name?
John's
Yeah.
Aurelia, 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 John Aurelia, OFM Capuchin.
Aurelio. Yeah.
And so in the parish, he was not, Father John was a little shrimpy guy who just didn't want to be a pastor, but you know, his provincial said, you're going to go down here, and he gave a number of seminars on Pio's holiness. And it just, and I'd never have I known, or will I ever known, someone who was intimate with the saint. You know, when other
You
than
know,
the
all of us.
well, I know. I was going to say, other than present company, you know. But the stories Father John would tell, because so was in this convent, you know, and so Father John was also there. He had a room next to Pio, and John would tell stories about some of the weird things that would happen at night in Pio's room. You know, like noises and shaking of walls. And in some of the biographies of Padre Pio, it was thought that the devil was visiting him and was frightening him and trying to tempt him and things like that. And so when we went to Italy on a pilgrimage, we spent like a week in that town in southern Italy where Pio built this huge hospital and all that. So I've always had a devotion to Pio, and yet it's not a devotion that many people understand, because I think it's modern. You know, it was contemporary to us. You know, I think he died in '68, and yeah. So that was, yeah, George. That was the story. Yeah, he was the private secretary to Pio.
Can I ask, does anyone have any reaction from the point of view of the bishops and the church for the election?
I haven't seen a thing.
I haven't heard a thing.
No, but not necessarily from their mouths, but from yours.
Oh, that's easy for some of us.
Well, in California, the Catholic bishops issued a statement about Proposition 1, and
Which passed.
which passed, and it wasn't
course.
nearly as bad as I thought. They were saying we look forward to further litigation about this, but
How strongly did it pass?
pretty strongly, I think.
I think you got 2/3 vote, didn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, you would have had all the unions and consumer organizations and
Yeah. But you know what the California bishops did in that statement was, they mentioned Proposition 1 and possible legal action and all of that, and lamenting that this opens the door to a lot of abuse and doesn't really help people and all of that. But then they talked in several paragraphs, I think, about, we have to redouble our effort to take care of the people who are affected by the need, the perceived need for abortion. And I think they, at least half of that statement I thought was very, very positive.
Salute.
Yeah. So that was true of Cardinal O'Malley in his statement on the Dobbs decision. A lot of it was spent on, the necessity for, us to stand up for, I don't know if he got specific, like pre and postnatal care, child income tax credits, universal daycare, those kinds of things that would support women who opted, even though poor, not to have an abortion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I'll have to go back and see it, but I think the California bishops did get somewhat specific on that sort of thing.
But overall, it seems to me that the country stepped back from madness.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
how so, Frank?
Well, a lot of the extremists didn't get elected. And the predictions, for example, about like a red wave, I think the former president is significantly weakened because on the one hand, his candidates didn't do great. And on the other hand, he got a rival, as much as I'm not happy with him, but who actually threatens his flank very strongly.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that the country kind of stepped back from this most extreme, uncivil, hateful kind of theme that's kind of threatened us for the past 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And let me comment. Because Georgia, Herschel Walker had been a student of mine when I taught at the University of Georgia. So when he announced that he was running, I got in touch with some former colleagues of mine, and we just felt. So Herschel Walker is a Trump-endorsed guy running for Senate in the state of Georgia against Raphael Warnock, who is the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is no slouchy parish in the Atlanta area, to say the least. And so there was a sadness that those of us that knew Walker from a teacher of his, that he would allow himself to be put into a situation of running for Senate. And just so much shit has come out. And, and the kid, when I knew him, he was an 18-year-old kid. He had not gone to school with a white person. He grew up in a county in southwest Georgia that was, the schools, even in 79 or 80, were essentially still segregated. And he would have never gotten into the University of Georgia unless he was this unbelievable superstar running back, for this small high school in Georgia. And he was dyslexic. He was at that time, he was telling people he was going to be an FBI agent. My best friend was the head of the criminal justice department, and she taught him more and more courses. And it was just like this neat, nice kid who just had this superstar status because of his football prowess. And everything that he did on campus that was negative was covered up. I mean, he had a son out of wedlock, which the athletic department covered up. The then president of the university, was shit canned because he had claimed that there was no favoritism given to athletes, that they had to meet the academic standards. Turns out that was all bullshit. And so, there's a court trial and all that. So Herschel has always been, in my opinion, a guy who has been easily manipulated. And I've been to this many times, going to Jacksonville to see my in-laws. We'd drive through this small Georgia town, Wrightsville, where he was from. And, it was, if you guys have not been into small southern black dominated towns, you've missed something. And and so to see him being exposed, it's a sadness to me. But then, he's 60 years old, 61 years old. He can make his own decisions. And I think he was completely duped by Trump. He was taken advantage of. Herschel, I'll support you, and all that kind of stuff. And I hope that he loses in the runoff on the 6th of December, because I think he would be embarrassed to be a member of the U.S. Senate. I think it would be embarrassing for him, because he cannot read, and so kind of information is going to get out quickly, by the voracious media that covers Washington politics, and so in a way, I'm hoping for his own benefit that he doesn't get elected. Apart from the fact that I don't want the Senate to go Republican,
Tim, the thought comes to me that he won't be able to read a teleprompter, so he's probably going to have an earplug with somebody talking in his ear rather than
maybe
a teleprompter.
Maybe. And the other comment on the election that I had is in Georgia, implemented very restrictive voting protocols. I mean, and it was in reaction to 2020. And they said, for example, if you're waiting in line, no one can bring you a bottle of water to refresh you and all this kind of stuff. And the liberal media and the liberal politicians said, you're destroying the ability of people to vote. Well, it turns out that even with those restrictions, voting turnout was enormous in Georgia. It was enormous. People just figured out how to work their way around through the system.
Mm-hmm.
You made a comment, but do I have any take on mine? Is when people want to vote, they'll figure out a way to vote, and they'll stand in line for 6 or 8 hours if they need to. And that's what's happened in the South, is you had voting turnout that was remarkably high, given the expectations that it was going to be diminished by all of this restrictive voting things, So I think it was a great day. I think Tuesday was a great day in many respects,
So I guess my question is more that if in fact the results of the election nationally sent a message that people to some extent have had their surfeit of hate and lies and narrowness and all of that kind of thing, is there an opening for the American bishops to move in and talk about the kinds of things that Christ would recommend as being the values that are somewhat hidden in that particular decision by the voters.
Interesting.
Why not
Yeah.
try? If there's no such opening, they'll be ignored. They're used to that, no harm, no foul. And if there is, it might fall upon ears anxious to receive it.
Well, if there is an opening, would the bishops notice?
Yeah, that's the
But
big.
they should. For example, in a number of states, Medicare expansion was overwhelmingly approved. Like in South Dakota and North Dakota, both the governors came out against Medicare expansion,
Right.
but it was overwhelmingly supported by the public. See,
Right.
to me, that's the kind of a social justice issue that bishops could hang their hats on. You know,
Right.
that they could, you know, I mean,
One would hope.
But isn't it
Yeah.
the kiss of death for the bishops to issue a statement on something?
No,
Nobody pays attention. Now, you know, there's a couple of bishops, Barron is one of them, Dolan is one of them, you know, who are kind of media superstars. But bishops probably have to take advantage of whatever positive media coverage they can
Yes.
finagle.
I'm wondering, Tom, if there's still part of the synodality that is a potential to get worldwide recognition, or is that possible in that venue?
Well, synodality is going to be a slow process no matter what.
Yeah.
It's just
And-
a baby step.
Pope Francis has extended a full year, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like it's more a grassroots effort than it is top down.
That's why I was wondering if the bishops might work at that connection, or would they just ignore it?
Well,
That's kind of my question, John, is, is in fact, if you step back for a minute, did the American people send a message that they want a change in tone in the country? And if so, is that an opening for bishops or preachers everywhere? To say that, to take advantage of that openness, that kind of synodality, if you will, in order to confirm the message, to build on it,
Mhm.
etc.
I think
Frank,
if
do
the
Frank,
bishops-
do you remember, I just recently reviewed a very quickly an article that was in the New York Review of Books, and several books were reviewed about the Irish reaction. And as I understand it, in Ireland, anti-abortion measures were incorporated into the Constitution of Ireland. And very quickly, not slowly, quickly, there was such a reaction by the populace that it got yanked out, and Ireland has now become one of the most economically powerful nations, and a most secular, where there was always a connection between the church and government. That's completely gone. How does that?
Pendulum big swing.
Yeah, how does that factor into something like this? It would seem to me that what you're saying creates a wonderful opportunity. But what about this Irish thing? And I don't see a toning down. I see in places hopeful stuff, like a lot of Trump's Picts were completely overwhelmed and beat. But there were others that did. Walker is one of them. It's like a big mix, and I'm afraid that we'll have this Irish thing visit us. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Well, Ireland's a
The
little different
church in
from us because
Ireland,
it was almost uniformly Catholic.
Yes.
Although over the past 20, 25 years, the Catholic Church has certainly weakened. But there was a structure of the major political party under Eamon de Valera and the Archbishop of Dublin, John Charles McQuaid. Now we're talking 25, 30 years ago, that basically held the country together in terms of its ethos. And that structure collapsed. And then on top of it came the sex abuse thing, and it just blew the whole thing apart.
and that scandal about the obstetrician lady
Yes.
that died.
Yes,
It was
that's the
really
abortion thing, yeah.
almost murdered. You
Right.
know.
The baby was dead inside virtually, but, and she went to have the baby removed. She was Indian, but
Mhm.
living in Ireland, married to an Irish man. And the baby, the Irish law apparently is as long as there's any sign of a heartbeat. And there was a faint heartbeat. So they couldn't take the baby until it was too late, and both of them died.
And that,
Yes.
we had an intern working for our firm who was an Irish law student.
Yeah.
And she told me, she said, I don't know anybody in the old country that's as Catholic as you are, George. You know, we've given up on it.
Yeah.
The Magdalens and this poor obstetrician.
Right.
I know a lady who was a Magdalene. She doesn't know I know, but
Yeah.
I know that about her. And I mean, what horror! And then those cemeteries, you know, and then, oh my God! I mean, how long is it going to take to come back from that, if ever?
Is that so different? Ireland so different that it's not really a possibility here in the United States?
I think so, in as much as there was a certain uniformity to control in Ireland by the Catholic Church on one hand and the political party called Fine Gael on the other.
So
There was a structural uniformity kind of imposed on the country by those two elements, that when the threads in the tapestry began to be pulled, like the things that George is saying, then it didn't take long for the whole thing to collapse.
It just went all at once. I mean, how many people in Dublin go to Sunday Mass now? 40%? I don't know.
That's high.
I don't want to go to Ireland, Ned. I would, because George, who's there? Yeah, it would just break my heart if I
Yeah.
went to Ireland.
Yeah.
You know, I've never seen a country in the middle of apostatizing before in real time. I missed Quebec,
Yeah.
but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I could bear it. I mean, almost every priest I ever met before I went to the seminary was Irish.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
And,
Especially in Long Beach. In Long Beach.
Well, you know,
local-
All Hallows was basically formed to serve the American mission.
yeah, but
And,
2 years ago, they didn't have a seminary.
Right, and you know, I saw somewhere that in 2021, there were 3 bishops ordained and 1 priest ordained in Ireland.
Well, that's a good ratio.
Yeah.
Actually, a good friend of mine just got appointed a bishop in Ireland, so.
Wow.
So good.
So Frank, then would it be super optimistic to say that we do have opportunities here in the United States for the bishops to stand up and in using some strategy that perhaps would lead with Dolan and Barron or some such, that we could begin to make people more aware and maybe turn it around.
Yeah, I
You're
think,
speaking, make people more aware of the condition in Ireland, Ned?
No.
No, this
Oh,
way.
of the possibilities here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Got it.
I think that's possible, but not with Dolan and Barron. I think, the bishops are going to elect their leadership this week.
Mhm.
And it seems to me that the most open two bishops in the whole thing are Archbishop Etienne of Seattle and Paul Etienne and Bishop Flores of Brownsville, Texas.
I met Flores and heard him say mass. He is a hell of a guy.
Yeah.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My
And
what about
brother-in-law said of him, the only problem with him is he smokes. And it's short, and I say to him all the time, Pendejo, what are you doing with your life? I mean, here you're one of our leading lights and you're not acting like it. But I don't know if the bishops were to suddenly start saying the right stuff, whatever that may be. I don't know. I don't think people would say, oh, they're the Catholic bishops. They're making sense. We better follow them. I think people would say, I don't know what they would say. I think the church has such zero credibility on sexual issues and abortion.
All right. What about immigration? I mean, if Kevin McCarthy is made speaker, he has said that his number one priority is border control, immigration issues. Doesn't the church, particularly the bishops along the Mexican border, don't they have a lot of credibility?
I think
Seems to
they
me
have some.
like this new
And Bishop
cardinal in
Flores does.
yeah, like the new cardinal in San Diego. I mean, would the church perhaps be able to find common ground with McCarthy? And I can't imagine that. First of all, I can't imagine the Republicans can put together anything decent anyway. A decent immigration policy or border control policy. But if that's going to be the issue that Republicans are going to seize on, then maybe that's where the bishop should say, okay, how do we influence that? And do we have any credit? We have no credibility on sexual issues. Okay. But do we have some credibility on immigration issues? Do we have credibility, those of us who are bishops of border dioceses? Do we have something to say about border control? I don't know. I'm just trying
I
to
think
find
some.
Yeah, I do too. I think, for example, I think maybe if we have someone who's talented enough to begin to use the secular media and take the bumps, like
Yes.
go on CNN or even Fox News and do an interview in which they talk about, for example, that the ground, as much as is a problem and as imperfect as we are, we're still going to always talk about the fundamental dignity of every human being.
yeah.
And I would say, excuse me, Frank, I would say if the bishops sincerely did a search of their diocese or archdiocese for immigrants who are now successful. I know of several who are very successful business people and have immigrants prosperous, because I think it's an economic thing as much as anything else, that the conservatives are saying these people will drain our finances.
Yeah. Well,
It is.
well, I mean, that can be
Right.
beaten on, but the point is, the bishops aren't economists. The bishops stand for the gospel, and the gospel says that the fundamental approach to every problem is
So-
the dignity of every human being born in the image and likeness of God. And
Can't
that's the
we say
bellwether against
both
which we have
and?
to ask questions.
Can't
Frank,
we
would
say
you-
both and? I mean,
What
one strategy is
economic
to
thing is the secondary question.
well, let me just say, if on the first part, it is a spiritual thing with our faithful.
Right.
But the second is in the country as a whole, how do we get people's attention? I think the linking the two is a strategy that would be that would get publicity and support.
I don't think that
Anyway.
would- I don't
So,
think it would dawn on the bishops, John.
I want bishops to be bishops.
yeah,
Don't you- Don't you
who
guys know immigrants who are very successful financially
Yeah,
and would be great advocates?
right.
Yeah.
But even,
People of faith who are also productive.
but even the ones who aren't successful financially deserve, according to the gospel, the dignity of the children of God.
Right, and I don't mean to exclude that. I'm just saying, if I had the ear of a bishop, I'd say, this might help our strategy.
Well, just a quick story about my brother-in-law. He was in some debate at UC Riverside, and some kid says, Bishop Barnes, the reason you're for all this liberality for immigration is because all these Mexicans are Catholic.
Catholics, yeah.
And Ricky's response was, no, it isn't. It's because I'm a Catholic.
Right.
And that's it. That is. We could probably do more there than we can with abortion, I think.
Yeah. I think.
I
Uh,
agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
But tone in the country where people are disrespecting each other, are lying to each other, are, the whole tone of the country has changed.
did anybody see?
Why is it right to lie?
Look at Trump.
Did
in
any of you
Ohio.
see on, was it 60 Minutes, Jonathan Haidt, and the focus on those extremists on TikTok? And he's done, Jonathan Haidt, right?
Yeah.
He's done extensive research, and in his opinion, those extremists are only 7%.
Right.
But they have found
Right.
templates and vehicles to push the hate.
Right.
7%.
Right.
Mhm.
So the corollary of that is deep in the heart of 93% is the opposite of hate and extremism. How do we bring that to the fore?
Speak up,
Norm,
Norm.
Norm, you're
Norm,
shaking
you
your head.
reacted.
Norm, you.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of people they really don't even have any opinion on it when you talk to them. So they're not two extremes.
Right.
There's one extreme, yes.
Yeah.
But the other extreme, I don't think is that high a number.
Sort of a bell curve.
Yeah.
Indifference. It's just
Yeah.
Two
indifference.
extremes, but a large middle.
Right.
I think a
Large
way.
middle of apathy.
So I was thinking about, kind of talking about what the church might do or bishops might do, is so you have a guy, this Ron DeSantis, who is born, raised, and practices his Catholic faith. His grandparents all immigrated from Italy, every one of them.
Is he a Catholic?
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And so
I just
I
rent
were-
my garments.
but if you think about put your strategizing hat on, looking forward to the next 2 years. I mean, DeSantis is going to be a powerful figure in Republican circles, I think. I think he's going to be very powerful. Somehow he has to be captured by some influential Catholic leaders?
I think seduced rather than captured.
Well, okay, but I was looking him up because I thought he was Catholic because he brags about his Catholic upbringing. And so if the church is not to be irrelevant, or not going to be irrelevant, then they have to have some influence on leading politicians. They have to have some influence within the Republican Party, at least. And so, if I were the National Conference of Catholic Bishops, I would put my thinking cap on, and say, okay, DeSantis is going to be a major competitor with Donald Trump. And so how do we reach out to him? How do we work with DeSantis? How do we modify him? How do we, whatever we need to do so that the church is not seen as irrelevant for these issues? Because DeSantis is his big thing is immigration, border control, the woke kinds of things, what is being taught in schools, critical race theory and all that. There needs to, I think the bishops need to get off their asses and say, okay, we need to have some conversations with this guy. Maybe I'm pie in the sky on it, but I think you want to have some influence on his agenda.
I think that's part of the strategy. But I also think, for example, that bishops send out letters all the time to priests and pastors asking them to touch on, or they make statements and say, read this in the church or put it in your bulletin, etc. What if we had a complete year in which bishops said, I would like you to develop over this year a thematic based on the gospel on the inherent dignity of every human person, and preach on that repeatedly during the year.
And that goes beyond abortion. That's an
Yes.
issue that's larger than abortion.
Yes.
And Frank, I think what you're describing is the bishop standing up against that 7% of the haters. And that's where the TikTok has just
from my point
invaded
of
our
view,
culture.
John, from my point of view, it's not them standing up against the 7%, it's them reaching down and drawing forth the 93%.
Which brings up a resistance to the 7%.
Yeah.
John,
but I mean, it's the question, are we a half full theology or a half empty theology? Did Jesus come to save us from our sins? Yes. Or did he come to
Save us from
confirm the most beautifully human within us? Yes. So
how do you, if you go back to what Norm said, that essentially it's not 90% on the other side of it, but there's a lot of indifference and don't give a shit kind of thing.
That's
how
right.
How do you reach those folks Norm is thinking about?
Well, that's a good point. Norm, that's a very good point, actually, that every one of the 93 aren't at the same point or whatever, that kind of thing. And that's a very good observation, but nevertheless, it's not an argument against trying what I'm proposing.
All right, it's not. John Drummer, you have a very large family.
I have to go, excuse me, because I have to go and have a COVID test for my procedure on Monday. So I'm sorry to kind of drop a bomb and leave, but
George, would you please give Frank a blessing before he goes?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, save my life, George, will you please? Oh, I thought about that all week, and I meant that not in any sense of drama, but
no. Well, thank you.
Spiritual.
Before you go, I'd like to ask that while you are under whatever you're going to be under, that you ask the question, can the bishops actually among themselves agree on having a unified voice about anything?
It's very good, Tom.
I actually would rather ask that question when I'm having a Negroni than when I'm under anesthesia. All right.
Well,
Goodbye. God
not
bless.
that we're on the hour.
Bye.
Go with
God
grace.
bless, Fred.
God bless.
Thanks,
God
Mike.
bless.
God bless. Bye-bye.
And I also have to go. I'm supposed to be at the NYC and the National Catholic Youth Ministry Association meeting in Fairmont.
Well, you're doing great work, Norm. God bless you, Ben.
I don't know if I'm doing great work or not, but I'm having fun.
But that's good for you.
That's the way to do
For
it.
you.
The joyful
Norm.
Christian. Yes.
God
I
bless you.
hope so.
Ned, I'm going to make a radical statement. I don't think the election gives the bishops any opening at all on abortion.
Yeah, I think you're right, George. I really do believe that abortion is
I
something.
wish I were wrong, damn
I-
it. You were supposed to trash me.
Well, no. So do I. I mean, you know how I feel. I guess you've been telling me that I'm the most conservative guy here. I hope that's just a perception, but
There's nothing wrong with being
But-
the most
no, I
conservative.
understand, but I think that we need to back off a bit from abortion because that's a stone hard wall in the United States right now. And we need to get to like what Tim is talking about, and you know that immigration is a great thing. You know, Senator from Florida who just got re-upped.
Rubio, Marco
DeSantis.
Rubio, Marco Rubio.
Rubio
Rubio.
had a fairly decent plan when he was running for president with respect to immigration,
You did.
and you know he would be someone I hope would be approachable, but I just don't think that in the Conference of Bishops that we have anyone who one knows much about, you know, politics, secular politics. I mean, I think of Reagan, President Reagan, and JP2 calling one another, talking with one another, you know, having this dialogue, a constant thing that at least partially but substantially resulted in what happened in the Soviet Union. Well,
Yeah.
I don't think that we have anybody in the Conference of Bishops in the United States that has that kind of imagination.
Maybe Dolan, I hate to give him any credit. He just strikes me as a peachy Rotarian.
You guys know what Pinchy means?
No, I don't. I don't know. I don't know.
What's it mean, George? Yeah, right.
Oh, it's like son of a bitch and kind of.
Yeah, but we don't. I remember going into Unical in 1980, and just because I had the experience of being in Senator George McGovern's national staff back in '72, I was asked all kinds of political questions, most of the answers to which I didn't have. I mean, I just do practical things when I was in the
Yeah, but you had instincts and judgment.
yeah, and that's but they didn't have political instincts. I think one of the reasons that Chevron took over Unical was because Unical didn't have the kind of imagination that they needed to survive. And that's what I think about the bishops. You know, it's a very large body that ought to have all kinds of influence, but they don't have the elan, you know, to get into it. You know, you've got to have an instinct that'll keep
I
you-
would really agree with that, Ned.
yeah.
I agree. They
Well,
don't
remember-
have, they do not have imagination. They don't have political imagination. They don't have cultural imagination. They basically don't know. They don't know what to do except to preach blowing in the wind.
Mhm.
What
What a revolt.
Remember John Carr,
Oh,
Tom? Do you remember John Carr?
Yeah.
sure.
Ned, do you?
Yes, of course.
He's at Georgetown now.
What, George? He's what?
At Georgetown.
Oh, yes.
I wonder if we could get him back. I mean, he, without putting too fine a finish on it, he was basically fired from the National Conference.
Yeah.
For being too liberal.
Yep. Now there's a guy that could whip something like what we're talking about up.
And Chaboya is not chopped liver,
Right, you're right.
but he's so.
Who's this John Carr guy, George? I'm not familiar.
He was head of the National Conference of Catholic Bishops, I guess social justice wing or social action wing.
Yeah.
Let's both look him up and then we can talk, because
Kind of like the Life, Justice, and Peace
yes,
Okay.
guy for the U.S. conference.
but a lot of people
Okay.
thought he was too liberal.
He was bright, is, maybe brilliant, and fantastic instincts.
Yeah,
And so he was thrown out.
It wasn't a disgraceful dismissal or anything, but it was just time to go.
Hold on a minute. I'll be back.
Goodbye, Tom.
I'll be back. Hello, Ethel.
So
Anyway,
can I switch the focus for a minute to Pope Francis? And
sure.
if Pope Francis were tuned in to our discussion, would we not reach out to him and say, can you bring about, maybe through the synodality, but can you bring about some unity among the bishops? Because we have such extremes. I mean, they're Vatican II deniers among the bishops, right?
I think he'd laugh politely
And
and
then
shrug his
how?
shoulders and say, "No, I
and say it's
cannot."
hopeless.
It's hopeless right now on my watch, I think he might say. Maybe not. Gary Lombardi's friends would say it's hopeless.
I mean,
My brother-in-law
his bishop.
would,
Yeah.
There was a-
would say it's hopeless, I think.
There was a
I
really good
think-
article in America just fairly recently about synodality. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them, but I can't remember the name of the author, John something, who I believe has written several books on Vatican II, Jesuit, wrote the article, and he explained that the first half of the two millennia that we've had in the church was one mostly of synodality, and then there was a transition period where popes began to abrogate more power and began the idea that the Pope was infallible, that the Pope could tell secular authority when it was right and wrong, and could depose kings and did, etc. And finally, we got to the point where we've got this vertical hierarchy with the Pope having this enormous amount of power within the church. Sometimes it's reflected in the world, like JP2 was able to do, and sometimes it's not. Mostly it's not. But it was a really good understanding. It really helped me understand that synodality is a real thing. It's an important thing. It's a grassroots thing that the bishops have to encourage and move along, but it would take a whole bunch of money. In fact, in 2024, I guess it is, there's going to be in Indianapolis some kind of ending to this synodality movement with great celebrations, et cetera. And that's going to cost millions and millions and millions of dollars just for those 2 or 3 days that are going to take place. And so,
And Tim, I'm sorry. The Napa Institute people will not donate to that a penny.
They don't. You know, I'm about to make a fool of myself.
No,
I am-
no, no,
Do it
don't,
again.
George, don't do that. Don't do that. Please don't. No.
Well,
COVID,
but-
you can't do that to me.
go ahead.
You've seen it in the past, Tim.
Okay. Okay.
I am, I just, this whole synodality thing leaves me just like, oh, stop it. You know, it's not going to go anywhere. It's a waste of time. The church has got its teachings. I'm trying to live up to those. What is the point of synodality?
Well, you don't have to have 100% of Catholics participating in synods, but you can have a small, powerful group like the 7%, progressives wagging the dog in the Democratic Party. Why can't we have informed, committed, intelligent Catholics, taking.
Well, what are they going to add to the teachings of the church?
Well, Francis is sure trying to bring that
Well,
about,
he is.
and
Yeah.
he's gotten his head blown off a couple of times by, the other side. But I think it's a real thing, and I hope it just moves ahead.
He does some dumb shit as much as I love him, but it really does. But anyway,
all of this that we're talking about, whether it is synodality or having some kind of a voice that makes a difference, requires some kind of finding common ground, common unity in areas where we are so toxically polarized.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the bishops don't have any voice. They've lost credibility. They can't develop a voice among themselves because they're politely and sometimes very impolitely really disagreeing with one another.
They're participants in this dissension.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, come on, I mean, bishops are just a microcosm of the rest of the community. I mean,
Okay.
they're
Where's
Yeah.
the leadership, for God's sake? Leadership. It's not Dolan. Dolan is in my opinion, and I agree with you, George. He's a Rotarian. He's a backslapper.
yeah. He loves Trump. He used to love Trump. Yeah.
well, I'm not sure of that.
Oh, did you watch in 2016 before the election? Did you ever see the video of the Al Smith dinner where
Hillary
Yeah.
and Trump. Yes, I did.
Hillary and Trump and the people that Dolan invited? I mean, it looked like Fox News. It was just it was fucking bullshit. And I think Dolan. And then I remember during COVID used to watch Mass from St. Patrick's, and there's a representative, a Republican named King, from New York, and
Yeah,
so
I know
King would be King is a Catholic, and he'd be in the front row, and Dolan would come after Mass and give him a big hug and grab him and go back and have coffee after Mass. And I thought, Dolan plays at both sides of the street. He really, really.
I thought so.
But he is a media personality.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, and
Carrying,
yes,
backslapping, hugging, yeah. But he is a media personality. He's probably the only one who could, in the media, consistently convey the kind of message that we're talking about. But
I agree with you.
he's not going to.
I just looked up the word synodality, It's from the Greek kav, something like that, meaning together, and uk, which means way or journey together, is in the Catholic Church a term often used to describe the process of fraternal collaboration and discernment that bodies like the Synod of Bishops were created to express. Well, that's nice. Does anybody know what that means?
I'll tell you what it brings up for me is I don't know who is Pope Francis' delegate to the US bishops. Do you know who that is, Tom?
It's this French guy.
Yeah, Pierre something or other.
Who's well regarded.
Yeah.
Is
Oh,
my
Good.
understanding.
Is he? Well,
Yeah.
regarded by whom, George?
Guys like us and more conservative bishopy types.
So he's well chosen. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. That's the impression I have.
Yeah, no, and my impression too is he works a lot behind the scenes. You know, he's not a firebrand that's going to go off and make a lot of statements or do a lot of things that will arouse controversy.
Well, we got Vigano for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vigano ought to be subjected to 40 lashes with a cat o' nine tails, but oh well.
Oh, that'd be too good for him.
Yeah, I mean, what do people like him think? But anyway, that's a rhetorical question. Assumes the fact's not in evidence. It's a legal objection goes.
Mhm.
Well, I'm gonna go take.
We running
a
out of
nap.
steam.
Yeah, I am.
It's been great to see you guys.
Great to see you, Tim. And stay out of
My
Nicole.
wife, I will do that.
Shelter yourself from Nicole's wrath.
I'll do that. You guys have a wonderful weekend.
And you have a
Get
great
some
time.
energy back.
And here comes Ned with a cup of coffee just in time to say goodbye.
Too late, huh?
Well,
Are we breaking up now?
John Grimmer, closing
Yes.
prayer, Johnny. Closing prayer.
yeah, John, please.
In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, you've created us in your image. You've existed from all eternity, but you chose to join our race 2,000 years ago. Help us to follow your lead. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Good night, guys.
God bless.
Good day, guys.
See you